Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to another set of reviews from Through the Eyes of Enji, where we're looking at doing 101 films in 365 days, raising money for We Are With You Shropshire and the Shawbury Village Players. Firstly, I probably do need to apologise. This one's running about a week late. As you know, I'm going to be doing 5 films in this review, and I'll be doing that for the next 3 sets of reviews after. Downside to this is I have to watch 5 films in a week, so I've been trying to catch up with as many of the films as I can so I can get back into something resembling a regular schedule. Now, today we are going to be looking at Sausage Party, High Fidelity, Terminator 2, The Book of Eli, and Beetlejuice. Now, I've got a little timer set up next to me so I can work on roughly about 5 minutes for each review. And then I'm going to put some timestamps at the bottom so you can have a rough idea of where to go for which review. So, let's start the timer. And the first film that we are going to be covering is Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Released in 1988, directed by Tim Burton, written by Michael McDowell and Warren Scarron, based on a story by Michael McDowell and Larry Wilson. Starring Alec Baldwin as Adam, Gina Davis as Barbara, Winona Ryder as Lydia, Catherine O'Hara as Delia, and of course, the great Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. The spirits of a deceased couple are harassed by an unbearable family that has moved into their home and hire a malicious spirit to drive them out. So, we've talked before about how comedy is really difficult to review, and Beetlejuice is no exception. It's an absolutely brilliant film. Most of the reasons why I can't tell you because it'll ruin the joke. But Beetlejuice was a landmark film for me growing up. It was my first real encounter with a dark comedy. And probably the one thing that truly makes it great is, of course, Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, even now, when you watch later films where there's a flash of it in Batman, there's a flash of it in Spotlight as well, there's a flash of it in The Founder, all brilliant films, by the way. And he just possesses this kind of dark energy as he flashes through the film. He is what Captain Jack Sparrow should have remained in the Pirates of the Caribbean film, in that he's just an enigma. He flashes from point A to point B. He causes chaos for the rest of the cast to deal with, and ultimately turns into an antagonist himself. But he doesn't carry the film. The film is carried by Winona Ryder, Alec Baldwin, and Gina Davis as Lydia, Adam, and Barbara, respectively. And they do a great job of playing Mr. and Mrs. Average Middletown America and a goth who has a really interesting chemistry both with them and with Keaton as well. It's not really a joke, so I can spoil it, I guess, when Lydia's having a conversation with Beetlejuice at one point, and he's talking about how he wants to rejoin the living, and she decided, I want to join the dead, and Keaton has this great delivery of just going, why? That doesn't sound like a great, but it's a great little moment, and he goes straight from this really sincere query to back into just bouncing around off the walls. And I suppose part of the comedy comes from the stop motion effects, which was the first time Burton had really used them to this extent that I've seen. And it's things like the artwork coming to life. It's the giant snake. It's quite terrifying, really. And I think that's something to keep in mind with Beetlejuice. It is a dark comedy, but it is actually kind of scary as well. I mean, the sandworm design alone gave me some nightmares when I was younger. Not to mention the artwork is just terrifying as it skittles and crawls around. And it's backed by a really impressive soundtrack, which is both loud and bombastic at the loud moments, but also is very creepy. It runs up your spine, up and down when Adam and Barbara first go into the land of the dead, and you see that all the civil servants are victims of suicide, and there's this really dark nature to the scene. Now, Beetlejuice's legacy has been diluted somewhat as the years have gone on, because we had a cartoon series which was very much aimed at children, which was not uncommon in the 80s, where you had something that was a deeply adult film like Beetlejuice or Robocop, and they had toys and they had cartoon series that were aimed at children. And the cartoon is good, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same because it loses the darkness that makes the film so good. I haven't seen the musical. I desperately want to see the musical, but having listened to the soundtrack to death, I feel that that's getting more in the vein of what Beetlejuice was in the original. And of course, there is a sequel. Apparently, there was Kevin Smith was approached to write Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii or something. Beetlejuice's Hawaiian Adventure or something like that. And there's been talk about the sequel coming along for years. I don't think it's ever going to happen because I don't know if Keaton would be able to get that same dark energy that made the first film so good. So I've already gone over my time. That's Beetlejuice. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it already, it's on Netflix. Do not miss Beetlejuice. It is a cracking film. So moving on, let's reset the timer. And I can now mark where we are. So for the timestamp, excellent. Right, next one. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Released in 1991, directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron and William Wisher. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, Edward Furlong as John Connor, Earl Bowen as Dr. Silverman, and Robert Patrick as the T-1000. A cyborg, identical to the one who failed to kill Sarah Connor, must now protect her 10-year-old son John Connor from a far more advanced and powerful cyborg. Okay, T2. This is kind of difficult to review as well, because Terminator 2, whilst it has its faults, and its impact and legacy is something we will talk about, it's kind of the perfect action film. Because the story's great, it has a definitive beginning and end, it's not opened up to sequels. The extended cut, which is the version I watched, has a very definitive ending that Judgment Day has been avoided. Now, the stunts are fantastic. The effects were groundbreaking. There's a ticking clock element as time goes on, and the action sequences are very well put together. The problem with T2 being so good is the impact of nostalgia that's had on the rest of the series, because Terminator 3 was not good, and it played using Schwarzenegger for comedy rather than the unstoppable killing machine, which is what he most definitely was in the original Terminator. And Terminator 2, yeah, it's dumbed down a bit, but it only goes to show him developing humanity and having a outside view on what humanity is. The feeling of being human as he develops with John Connor. However, Salvation and Genesis were just trying to ape T2. And I feel that Dark Fate got going in a better direction. But still, we can't... The Terminator series can't seem to get away from a good guy, Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, and variations on the T-1000 are the standard Terminator now. The standard Terminator villain now. But, you know, sometimes imitation is flattery, because you're going to pick something to imitate. Terminator 2 is not a bad start. I've always liked the reversal of roles in T2. I like how the T-1000 is a police officer, this symbol of law and order. The Terminator comes across as a biker, a symbol of rebelliousness and chaos. And their roles are very much switched. Now, obviously, I was about 6 in 91, so when T2 came out, I certainly remember all the advertising and the arcade game and everything. But I'm not sure whether the twist of whether Arnold was playing the hero of the story was released before time. Because I can imagine it being a fairly big shock to people in the audience who went in and saw that initial sequence where John's in the corridor, T-1000 walking one way as the copper, the roses falling out the box with the shotgun, and promptly Schwarzenegger giving the like, "Get down." If you didn't know that twist was coming, then I can imagine that being a bit of a shock to the system. The effects, as I've said, are groundbreaking as hell. The rising out of the floor sequence, whilst it was similar to what Cameron had already done in The Abyss, I think that was a real game-changing moment. And the fact that it employs practical stunt effects as well, particularly in the climactic show chase sequence that seems to be in every Terminator film now, I come to think about it, with the Terminator running across the top of a lorry. It was real effects, and not having everything done by CG shows, and it just makes it a better film. And yeah, the legacy of T2 is that it is a phenomenal action film. It's a staple for me. I usually find myself watching T2 at least once a year because it's just a solid action film. Again, just like Beetlejuice, it's fantastic. It's easy to get a hold of. Let's be honest, probably everyone's got a copy of T2 somewhere at this point. Watch the director's cut. It's got Kyle Reese in it. His appearance makes sense, and it kind of makes you miss Michael Bay and all that more, which I think is the point. And it has a much more definitive ending that should have closed the door completely on the Terminator films. However, we had to sit through multiple bad films to get to Dark Fate, which was actually good. Right, gone over the 5 minutes again, but that's not too bad. We are halfway through. We're nearly halfway through. We're doing well. Right. Okay, next up. Another tricky one to review. Next up, we've got High Fidelity. High Fidelity, released in the year 2000, directed by Stephen Frears, written by D.J. DeVinctus, Steve Pink, John Cusack, and Scott Rosenberg, based on the book by Nick Hornby. Starring John Cusack as Rob Gordon, Eben Hegeli, I think, as Laura, Todd Luiso as Dick, Jack Black as Barry, and Catherine Zeta-Jones as Charlie Nicholson. Rob, a record store owner and compulsive list maker, recounts his top 5 breakups, including the one in progress. Right, so High Fidelity. High Fidelity was, for a very long time, my favourite film. I first saw it at the age of 15, and it resonated with me at the time, having not long since had my first proper breakup. And I think that shadow of nostalgia kind of has hung over the film for a long time for me. So revisiting it now was an interesting experience. And yeah, okay, I'm gonna get it out there now. Let's make it clear. There is a cameo by Bruce Springsteen, and I squeal every time. And it is probably the only cameo I've ever seen him do. It fits perfectly. I love it. Does it make the film better? I'm kind of... When that cameo kicks in, I'm normally on cloud 9 for about half an hour afterwards, so that might colour my opinion of the film. And I came away with this viewing of High Fidelity thinking it's still a solid film, and I think now I'm in my mid-30s, I'm watching it going, that reminds me of so-and-so, that reminds me of so-and-so. It's a film about real people. The problem is, not all real people are nice. And John Cusack's Rob Gordon is an asshole in this film. He's just a horrible dick. He's unpleasant to everyone around him. He mopes and whines constantly. And to be honest, when he's talking about the things he's done, I'm not surprised Laura has left him. Because he's needy, neurotic, he's cheated on her. I'm not surprised she's left him. There are changes from the book, but as I've said previously, this is a review of the film and not the book. However, the move to placing the film in Chicago rather than London, I think, is where it's based in the original, doesn't make a big difference. It's only going to be a few jokes from the book that were more related to being based in London that really were lost, and they're not incorporated into the film either. So, yeah, I've got no issue with the relocation. I love the pop culture references in there. There's a great sequence discussing Evil Dead 2, which is another film that I first watched in that period that I love as well for the same reasons. But I'm not revisiting Evil Dead 2 because I don't need to be reminded how great it is. Oh god, now I really want to watch Evil Dead 2. Anyway, so I think one of the problems with High Fidelity is a problem I've seen in other films as well, where a lot of the humour, not all of it, but a lot of the humour is based on pop culture references. And you see this more in the likes of the Scary Movie franchise, where, oh hey, I recognise this, makes you laugh. And I think when in a few hundred years' time, if people are archaeologists of the future are looking at the likes of Scary Movie, they will be scratching their head trying to understand why this was considered so funny. And whilst most of the humour in High Fidelity doesn't fall into this trap, a lot of it does. And yes, that does include the previously mentioned Evil Dead 2 sequence, but High Fidelity twists the humour in such a way that it doesn't feel like that kind of rip-off spoofy humour that you would see in the likes of Scary Movie. It's the Evil Dead 2 scene is discussing the definition of the word yet. And Rob is trying to illustrate his argument as to debating whether the word yet actually means what he thinks it means by using Evil Dead 2. And I've broken my rule of explaining a joke, and I've probably just ruined it for a lot of people, so I apologise, because you really should give High Fidelity a watch. It's really funny, it's kind of charming in its own way. Yes, the lead character's an arsehole, but, you know, he gets strips torn off him repeatedly, so I've got no problem with that. There's a bit of a worrying sequence towards the end involving him and his ex, and how they're coming back to, and how their relationship is developing. That is a bit troublesome, but overall, High Fidelity is a really funny, light-hearted film. It's a couple of hours. It's well worth your time. Not as easily available as the previous two films, but if you can find it, let's be honest, guys, DVDs are selling at shops in town for £1. I think you can manage £1 to watch a great film. Okay, way over with that one. So let's reset the clock, and let's go on to the next one. Okay, so The Book of Eli, released in 2010, directed by Albert and Alan Hughes, known as the Hughes brothers in the credits, written by Gary Whitta. Starring Denzel Washington as Eli, Gary Oldman as Carnage, Mila Kunis as Solara, Ray Stevenson as Redridge, and Jennifer Beals as Claudia. A post-apocalyptic tale in which a lone man fights his way across America in order to protect a sacred book that holds the secret to saving humanity. Okay, right, Book of Eli. Again, like with a comedy, Book of Eli has got a massive twist at the end. Probably up there with the... In fact, it probably is my favourite twist of a film I can think of. So I've got to be very careful doing this review, because The Book of Eli is a film that really benefits from being watched twice. So you watch the film, you see the twist, watching it again, it becomes a very different film to watch. Honestly, if I could wipe my memory of three things, my memories of playing The Witcher 3 would be one, knowing the twist of The Book of Eli would be another. So it's an easily watchable film. It's visually very good. The twist is an absolute killer. Now, granted, I say you should watch it twice, but by the end of your second viewing, some of it might not make much sense, and just go with it. Just enjoy the flow of the film. It's worth it. Now, this is very much, despite having some class actors here. Gary Oldman as a villain again. Gary Oldman usually plays the villain, but he's very good at it. But this is Denzel Washington's film. He is as good, if not better, in this than he is in my other favourite Denzel film, which is Training Day. he carries the film really on his shoulders, and you may already know from trailers what the sacred book is, but as it comes in and you start to see what the book is and how people react to it when they know that he possesses the book, it drives the film. And really, if you listen to the description I gave and you thought, oh, post-apocalyptic, oh god, not another one. Okay, fair, but it probably feels more like a western than it does a post-apocalyptic zombie film. It's very clever how it develops, because it is very much the lone wanderer to begin with, and then he and stranger strolls into town and has a scrap and all this. But the end, one of the final sequences is straight out of a western with a building under siege, and it's incredible. It's just a great film. And if it sounds like I'm being really light on details, it's because, again, this is a hard film to review because you can't fucking talk about most of the film without ruining it. I would quite happily say that The Book of Eli is the best film I've watched since I started doing these reviews, and it's one I will wholeheartedly watch again. It's a great film. The soundtrack is minimalistic, but it works. Washington's fantastic. Oldman as a villain is just pitch perfect. Even there's little things like what has become valuable in the future, and how Denzel Washington's most prized possession after the book of the Book of Eli is it's his iPod, and it's working when the iPod runs out of battery. It's how do I find somewhere with electricity to charge the damn thing up, and how do I trade for that electricity? And the film thinks about these things. When you first watch it, everything makes sense. It gets a little wobbly the second time you watch it, but again, that twist is an absolute killer. Right. 10 seconds spare on that one. Okay, right. Last but not least, the one I've been least looking forward to. Thanks for this, Neil. So, Sausage Party. Released in 2016, directed by Greg Tiernan and Conrad Vernon. Written by Kyle Hunter, Ariel Schaefer, Seth Rogen, and Evan Goldberg. Based on a story by Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, and, oh god, Jonah Hill. Starring Seth Rogen as Frank, Paul Rudd as Darren, Edward Norton as Sammy, Salma Hayek as Teresa, and Kirsten Wiig as Brenda. A sausage strives to discover the truth about his existence. Right. Think about that description. A sausage strives to discover the truth about its existence. Yeah. So, you might have noticed a few cast members are missing from the cast list, and that's partially because fuck James Franco. Okay, so Sausage Party. It's worth pointing out now, with Sausage Party, your mileage may vary, because it is a really... The humour is not... I don't really know how to describe it. It's definitely, I can imagine four stoners sitting around a table making gags and then we'll get the sausage to fuck the bun, and that going in the film. It's very racy. There's horrific amounts of bad language in the film, some very twisted, dark humour. And I love it, but I can understand that there are people who don't find a lot of the jokes funny. I mean, certainly the opening, which is a bloody musical number, you can probably watch that musical number and you'll know by the end of the song whether the film is for you. And, you know, I do quite like how the stereotypes certain foods have is kind of transferred into the film. So the German sauerkraut are dressed up in the regalia of the Nazi party and they want to exterminate the juice. To be honest, I think just telling you that, spoiling that joke for you, will probably tell you whether Sausage Party is for you or not. And that musical number is just insane, and it throws so many gags at you right from the get-go, and the film never really lets up. And it runs with the food stereotype thing. So the hot dog, sausage and buns are pure blood American, and obviously we got the sauerkraut as the Nazis, and meatloaf. Oh god, this film has the best meatloaf gag I've ever seen. I'll leave it at that. And you kind of got the non-perishables as well. So you got like Indian whiskey is played up with the standard stereotype of an Indian from the Old West. And it might seem on the surface that Sausage Party is just gags about sex, drugs, and booze, and the humour between seeing food that swears. But there seems to be something more going on under the hood of Sausage Party, because it is a film at its core, it feels like, about atheism, because all of the food in the store worship humans who are coming to buy them, unaware of what happens outside the store. And obviously there's a mock-up of a horror film where the food are all quite happy and lucky, and then they start being hacked to pieces by someone who's cooking dinner. And all the food before that worship humans as gods, and it's not until that's broken which leads into what is, and we do have to talk about the ending. The final 15 minutes of Sausage Party are the most insane thing that I've ever watched in an animated film, comedy or otherwise. My jaw slammed down onto the floor and remained there for pretty much a quarter of an hour as things just escalate to become weirder and weirder, and they go to places I didn't think they would go. That being said, there is an argument that this film, I'm reading too much into Sausage Party, and the making of the film is very much an excuse to get away with the jokes about the juice and having bagels and flatbreads as a stand-in for the Israel-Pakistan conflict, because they're both arguing about who should control the shelf space. And I wonder if I'm reading too much into this and I'm giving Sausage Party too much credit, because at the end of the day, whilst there might be deeper things going on, what you're going to see when you first watch it, and it is very watchable if that humour is to your taste, then you're going to have a film that is about food that drinks, smokes weed, and has sex. And if that sounds like something that you might like, you go, you do you. I don't give Sausage Party the same recommendations as I do the other 4 films that we've talked about today. I think if you go on YouTube, watch the musical number. It's about 4 or 5 minutes, and you'll probably know at the end of the musical number whether the film's for you or not. It thinks it's cleverer than it is. Is it worth the price of admission just for that final 15? Yeah, it is. It's that bloody weird. Okay, so that's the first 5 films. We're clocking in just under half an hour. I think this has gone reasonably well, so I'm going to do it again next time. Hopefully, we should be doing this soon. And the 5 films that we are going to be watching are going to be The Patriot, Star Trek First Contact, High School Musical 3, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and then we've also got my favourite. We're doing Disney's Hercules. Who put the God in gladiators? I should stop singing, shouldn't I? Right, thank you very much indeed for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again later in the week. Thanks for watching.